Hey, it's Brian. Welcome back to Heart to Heart. On today's episode, we spoke with Ken Sanzel. Having worn various hats in his life, from serving as a transit cop in New York City to being a noted screenwriter, showrunner, and director, Ken has a treasure trove of experiences and stories. Ken's journey from the NYPD to the heart of Hollywood, coupled with his apparent knack for storytelling, offers valuable insights into how power dynamics work in the entertainment industry. Before you listen, you've got to grab our Backstage Pass. It's packed with Ken's top tips, insider advice, and additional resources that will give you a competitive edge. You can grab the Backstage Pass by going to podcastbackstagepass.com.
Ken, you still look the same. How did you meet Felix?
Drinking. Cannons, yeah.
You know what's funny? So Ken, this story is so inspiring because I was telling Brian how we met. So first of all, you were one of my absolute favorite customers with Felix. The two of you would come in. I was a bartender trying to pursue an acting career. And the two of you would come in and it was just like the party started. And you would sit at the end. Was it you or Felix that had to sit at the end of the bar?
Well, that was probably Felix. Probably Felix, yeah.
Okay, so you had to sit at the one end of the bar. And I don't know if this goes on anymore in America at all, but how many bars do you know, probably in like small town USA, where I literally set the bottle of Glenfiddich, I believe. Glenlivet or Glenfiddich?
Knock and do. It was knock and do.
Okay.
Knock and do on the rocks with a Coke back. I remember that.
That's right. I set it down right in front of you guys. So this way I wouldn't have to pull it out every time. And between the two of you, you could handle so much and it didn't even seem to affect you guys.
Yeah, I don't do that anymore.
I know. But what's interesting, Ken, so I'm a bartender and I'm serving you guys and it seems like every other minute I got to refill your glasses. And then you start talking about like, you would say like, and by the way, everybody, so Ken at that time was a New York City cop, transit cop, right? Or a detective.
Well, I was a transit cop, and then I guess I was a detective in transit, and then after the merge, briefly, I was still a detective before I left. Yeah.
Now, do you remember, Ken, when you invited me one night to come with you? I don't know if you remember this, but I got to go and meet you in around 42nd Street in the subway area, and I came to your office.
Yeah.
Yeah, I came to I never, as a New York City subway participant or a rider, I never noticed that like hidden door with all as my friend Doug Moyer,
room,
who was a cop, said coppers would hang out. And then, I met you there, and then you and I walked your, whatever you want to call it, walked the beat like that night till like 4 and 5 in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had some kind of like life back then.
It was fun.
So what I was enthralled with is you'd sit at the end of the bar with Felix all night, and then you'd always be like, "Yeah, I'm going to go home now and write." I'm like, it was like 2 or 3 I don't know what time in the morning, but you would go home and write. And I wanted to ask you, when did you know you wanted to be a writer? When did you feel like, were you like 8 years old? You said like, one day I want to be a writer. How did the writing happen?
Oh yeah, I wrote from when I was a kid, and I wrote. I tried to write screenplays and TV scripts back when I was probably 12 or 13 or something. And I remember I wrote a spec script for Vegas, the Robert Urich show, and I had a rejection letter from Burton Armus, who I guess was the showrunner. So yeah, and then I go into writing fiction from time to time. I kind of went back and forth. And actually it was when I started drinking with Felix. He knew Linda Fiorentino, and
yep, she hung out there.
He had these sort of tenuous connections into Hollywood, and that kind of inspired me to get back into trying to write a screenplay again. And I wrote a really bad transit cop screenplay, that didn't do anything.
I have to confess, Ken, when I was a bartender and you and Felix were over there having on your, seems like 9th or 10th whiskey, I'd be like, this guy says he's going to go home and write, and he's going to write a screenplay. Good luck to him.
Yeah.
And then I run into Betsy years later, and she's like, "Oh no, Ken's going on to do this." And no, I actually the Replacement Killers came out. That was a big deal. Everybody was like talking about it. So was that your first screenplay?
That wasn't the first one I sold. That was the first one that got made. Yeah.
And what's her name? That's when she was like really. I can't believe I'm saying what's her name.
Mira Sorvino. Yeah.
Mira Sorvino. She was really big at that
Yeah.
time, and she was so. So I just was curious to hear your story, like how the transition happened from going from a New York City police officer to like all of a sudden saying, you know what, I'm leaving, and now I'm making my living as a writer / showrunner.
Yeah, I wasn't brave enough to do that. What happened was I met my wife, and we opened this gallery, and that was sort of it was a side gig for me, and she was running it full time, and I'd go in and help out at the gallery, when I was not working, and we had a computer, so that was. I guess I'd had a computer before, looking back, but we had a brand new computer for the gallery, and I started writing again. And I wrote a script. I wrote another script. I had my childhood best friend, Steve Cohen, had gone to Columbia Film School, and then he'd gone out to LA and gone to work for a company called Savoy Pictures. And I'm trying to remember the whole timeline, but I remember I wrote this one script he really liked called Rewind, which has never gotten made or even sold. And his boss didn't like it at Savoy. I think he showed it to someone at Savoy. He showed it to an agent at William Morris, who kind of flirted with signing me, but then didn't. And then while that was going on, I was writing more stuff. And I wrote a script called Crosstown Riders, also has never gotten made, but he showed that to his boss at Savoy, and his boss bought it. And then they gave me a rewrite job on Ghost Rider, which at that time was with them. Passed through a million hands on its way to getting made, and then they bought 3 other scripts from me. And when I got the 3-picture deal, was around the same time as a detective, they were transferring me to the Bronx. And so then I started to do the math of, well, I have the money to take a chance, and, commuting from, I think we were living on the Upper East Side at the time. So to go from the Upper East Side to the Bronx and then back down to Soho, I was like, it was time to move on. Plus I loved being a road cop, but I never really loved being a detective.
Oh.
I found it really bureaucratic.
A lot of paperwork.
I come out of like working in decoys and stakeout squads, and that stuff was fun. But yeah, I never was temperamentally great at being a detective, which I remember much later on, I met Sonny Grosso, who's he was played by Roy Scheider in The French Connection. He's the not Popeye Doyle. And Sonny Grosso went on to build a small empire of TV movies and shows and stuff, and they were doing a pilot based on his life and kind of the real French Connection. And I met with him about, I guess by then I was a showrunner. I probably met with him about showrunning. And when I told him that I'd never really enjoyed being a detective, that was the end. I was dead to him. He couldn't understand any cop who didn't love being a detective.
So it's just such an inspiring story. But well, first of all, Ken,
it shouldn't be. It's a lot of luck.
What's your wife's name?
Laura.
Okay, so Laura, would you say she was she had to be a huge player in like turning your life around to like all of a sudden, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was in a lot of ways, yes, temperamentally, and in terms of your life, it changed things, and I wasn't a guy sitting in a bar 4 or 5 nights a week anymore.
So what I want to ask you is, how did the like how did Blue Bloods come into play?
Oh, Blue Bloods. That was I was I was on an overall at CBS. I'd finished Numbers. Numbers had gotten canceled, and I sold a pilot. Right, I guess right as Numbers was getting canceled, I sold a pilot to the CW through my Paramount/CBS deal that was set in Thailand. And I went to Thailand. I directed the pilot, and it didn't go. And then they called me up and they said, "Hey, this pilot is going, and we'd like you to run the show." And I met with the creators. I met with what's his name, Leonard Goldberg, who had done Starsky and Hutch and Vegas. I don't know if he'd done Vegas, but he'd done a lot of those shows that I'd grown up on, those cop shows. And we got along okay. And then I met with the creators who thought they were running the show. And that was this kind of awkward conversation. I walked out and said, I called CBS and said, they think they're running the show. And I don't want to be, that guy who's kind of, an unwelcome boss. But then some shit happened, I guess, and conversations bounced around. And the creators called me and said, well, they're not going to let us run the show. So, if it's going to be someone, it might as well be you. And with that ringing endorsement, I went to work. But it was, it was a life lesson in, I talked myself into taking the job, and I knew I didn't really like the show, and I didn't like a lot of people involved with it, including Tom Selleck. And when you're really unhappy doing something, it comes out pretty quickly. So I was gone within 6 episodes. I kind of mapped out the season, and then, without going into the gory details, Tom Selleck is a person who's kind of politically and temperamentally aligned in a different way than I am. And it kind of came to a head over a good script, and he had a tantrum, and I called CBS and said, this is what happened. I'm not walking out, but you probably ought to find someone who will get along with him. And I guess it took them a couple of years. They finally did find someone.
Hey, let me hear your philosophy on this one. So, all right, so Tom Selleck, when he had a tantrum. Now, do you feel like, because I've always wondered this, if he wasn't Tom Selleck, let's just say he was Joe Smith, and he didn't have the career he had, do you think that same guy would be having the tantrum, or do you think because he had such success in his life, and now he's, the big player on Blue Bloods, that something happens to some people's heads where they become so big, it's like the king, and don't upset the apple cart?
Well, I definitely think, at CBS, there were a bunch of shows like that. I don't know what it's like now, but there were a lot of these shows that were led by actors who had at some point thought they were going to become movie stars, and then had to resign themselves back to being TV stars. And I didn't hear good stories about very, very many of them. But yeah, I think the metric of power in Hollywood is always the person with the most power is the person who's the hardest to replace. So if your show is based on Tom Selleck, he's the hardest person to replace, followed by the showrunner, followed by blah, 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 blah. But so it's the same in reverse in movies. The reason writers are arguably more powerful in TV than directors, and vice versa in movies, is because you replace the director every week. No big fucking deal. When I'm running a show, honestly, I think the cinematographer is more indispensable than the weekly directors usually, because that's the person setting the look, and setting the tone. And then, obviously in a feature, a director is more indispensable, but always underneath the star. I think I heard that George Clooney once said that, it's when he's on a set, he's conferring power to the director, which I think is what what smart actors do. Smart actors work with directors that they trust or whose sensibility they want to sign on to, and then they confer power to them. But the power is always with with the person who's making the thing happen. And that's usually, a Tom Selleck or, I've worked with other big stars, none of whom I dislike that much, some of whom, I also had conflicts with, but usually, it was a negotiable conflict. It wasn't an intransit. I'm going to mispronounce that word, so I'll find another one. I think at the end of the day, most people that I've worked with, we've come to sort of a place where the actor trusted that I was at least looking out for them, and that I was looking out for the interest of the show, or the movie. With Selleck, Selleck wanted to do what Selleck wanted to do, and at the end of the day, that show's is still on. I don't know who the fuck watches it, but he knows his audience. He knows how he's going to stay on TV, and no, he was right. I was sent there. I was sent there by CBS to make. What happened was I got called in. I got flown into LA to meet with the people at CBS and Paramount who I'd worked with a bunch of other times. And, this was when I took over the show, and I said, I'd seen the pilot, and I said, the pilot, is that the show you want to make? And they all went, I guess it's podcast. They all just silently shook their head. And I said, so the show you want to make, and, we kind of got down to what is the show you want to put on? And I knew what kind of show they wanted to put on because I've been working there, putting their shit on the air. So, it just, that wasn't what Tom wanted. And ultimately they eventually just gave Tom the show he wanted after trying to make it, the kind of show that all their other shows are. So,
but here's what I'm asking. So, you mentioned the word tantrum, and there's that expression, Ken, and I know you live by this, and we haven't talked to each other in years, but I got to know you very well. Don't forget where you came from. So do you think like a guy like George Clooney would have a tantrum? I don't think so.
No. I think it's, it's certain people. I think with Tom, I don't want to turn this into a big Tom Selleck.
No.
But, the first time you meet him, he tells you how he was supposed to be Indiana Jones. I think his whole mental metric is, if only I had been Indiana Jones, I would have been Harrison Ford, not Steven Spielberg. Thanks God every day that you weren't Indiana Jones. And so I think that, whatever his shit is, whatever ego he's wound up in, I came to conflict with him over a script because he had a very racial point of view on what a terrorist was, and an ethnic point of view on what a terrorist was. And we had a script that was really interesting. I didn't write it, but it was, it was challenging to that. And so at the end of the day, he wanted to wrap up a show in whatever kind of conservative worldview he has that I don't. But yeah, I think all actors are different, and all actors, everyone has bad days. I've had tantrums as a director, and then you get over them and you apologize, or, I guess if you feel like you don't have to, you don't. So
did it bum you out to have to leave such a, kind of famous show or, iconic, depend whatever, regardless of, if you watch it, kind of iconic,
it wasn't
former cop.
It wasn't famous or iconic when I left. It was just starting. Sure, would I like the blue blood money? I guess, but I hated going to work so much every day on that show. More than any other job I've had. I was thankful that he gave me the out that he gave me, that he gave me a reason to leave. I mean, God bless the people making a living, and that show is, you know, done well for a lot of people, uh, employed a lot of actors and writers and stuff, and that's great. But I, that was where I started to take a turn away from. I had I had like one more deal away from not being filthy rich, but having enough money to no longer make things that I wouldn't watch. And that was something where, you know, there was nothing about that show as we were making it, even if we had made the version of it CBS wanted that I thought might be okay. It was just never a show that I would have turned on and watched. So no, yeah, that doesn't bum me out.
Hey, it's Brian. I'm dropping in on an important announcement. What you need to know is you have more control over your career than you think. The thing standing between you and the career you want is your connections, and that's where One-on-One Next Level comes in. If you are not a member yet, you can apply to join at oneononenextlevel.com. Press pause and do that now. If you are already a member and you are ready to get back on track, we want to invite you to book a strategy session with us led by myself personally. We will help you prioritize which classes make the most sense given your career goals. You can find these under the Resource Hub in your account portal. We can't wait to hear your success story.
Ken, there's certain people that you just know they never forget where they came from. Do you remember that night at the bar when Tom Cruise trained?
Oh no, I wasn't there. I heard about it
Okay.
after. I wasn't
So I
there.
was there, and you know what? I got to say, Tom Cruise, class act. That guy,
Yeah.
class act.
I mean, my experience has been the more truly successful an actor becomes, usually the more generous they are. And the actors I've had the most problems with have been the ones who are acting the way that they felt a successful actor should behave and not the way most success. I mean, I just did a movie, I guess it's like 3 years ago now, with Nick Cage, and Nick Cage is an icon. He goes beyond just successful. He's a guy who you say it, and I don't care how old or young you are, you know who Nick Cage is, and could not have been a more professional, more generous guy on set, not just with me, but with other actors, just patient, prepared. There was nothing about him that was ever kind of angry or bitter. And, we were doing a small movie and he never made me feel like, oh, well, this is a movie I'm doing, as a favor or as a money job. He came there and just was all in to do it. And I think that's, the best artists, just kind of go all in on making it no matter what.
And I think that's such an important point because most of our listeners, I mean, our community is mostly actors. And it's so, we say it all the time. In a way, it's a small industry and your reputation follows you. And
Yeah.
if you're difficult to work with, people talk and they don't want to work with you.
Oh, it gets around very fast. And the truth is that I think a lot of times, even in auditions, you can tell, who's going to be fun to work with and who's not going to be fun to work with right away.
Really?
And oh yeah, I mean,
can you elaborate on that? Like how can you tell?
I mean, first of all, I think that and I watched this a lot in TV where directors would just have people come in, read, and send them back out, and that was inconceivable to me. And even as a showrunner sitting in on auditions, I would often, I would do the adjustment if the director didn't, just because I think that you're not just auditioning an actor's take on something and what they look like and how they sound, but how they respond, what kind of vocabulary you have with them and how they respond to those adjustments kind of tells you whether there's someone who wants to play or there's someone who wants to come in and kind of protect an ego or, put a fence around their part of the work. And so, yeah, so I can usually tell, some actors come in and you just know right away from giving them an adjustment and the way that they respond to getting direction that it's going to be a life's too short, before you even get to all the other shit,
Yeah.
And then, quite frankly, and this may be the writer in me, but actors who come in and have already rewritten the script, they're fucked. They're fucked on the outside. Nobody ever says, "Oh boy, I'm really thankful to that actor for coming in and telling me everything that's wrong with the script before they get the job."
Yeah.
That's interesting, Ken, because you know what? There was a director that years ago I was friendly with. His name is Gary Winnick. He taught it one-on-one, and he always said, a lot of times the actor, I don't want to say makes the mistake, but he says, can misinterpret. They come in and they feel like they look at the director. This is before they get the job. That the director has all the answers. And he says, as me as a director, meaning Gary as a director, he goes, when an actor comes into like the callback room, and I'm actually looking for the actor to sometimes, even though I created the character and wrote it, I'm looking for the actor to maybe show me something I didn't see when I was writing it. And a lot of times I've cast actors who like teach me the way the character comes to life.
Oh, but that's completely different. That's an actor looking at a page and saying, "Hey, I want to go at it from this direction." There's a difference between interpreting a part when an actor comes in and rewriting the script. I mean, I remember having I think it was the first pilot I wrote, and it was for Fox. So, it's a network show. And we had this guy come in and he put fuck in every single fucking line, like he thought that would make it sound edgy. And I was like, okay, that's whatever gambit that is you're going for, I get it. But then we asked him, okay, please let's go again. Here's an adjustment or two, and please, stay on the script. Don't go with the fucks. And he does the fucks all over again. Now, maybe that's hardwired into him, but it's like right away, that tells me that actor, isn't interested in hearing what you have to say about what you need from the scene. But that's not the same thing. I mean, especially with the indie movies that I've directed, I'm desperate for actors to come in and be smarter than what I've written. I'm desperate for them to come in and just attack the character from a way that I didn't write it. But that's different from changing the script. That's looking at the script.
Can you give one story to share with our actors, like when that happened, how it happened?
God, I mean, it happens all the time. But on the last movie, actually, we were casting. There's a character named Oso who's like the kind of this big goon who works for this woman who's like a gangster, and he ends up in this scene with Nick that's sort of pregnant with violence, and it's about the two of them swinging dicks with each other, and it was totally written for sort of that big beefy older guy, is the total cliche of that character. And then we were reading for a bunch of other parts, and this is in Colombia. So we're casting Colombians who can speak English, and that's this kind of it's a larger pool on the second movie I shot in Colombia than the first, but because as the younger people have been coming up, they speak more English. But so this young guy came in, and he read for another part, a smaller part, and I just kind of liked his look. And I said, I kind of sent him out with the script for Oso, for the bear, and said, just see what you do with it. Don't read what it is. Don't read the description. Come back with it. And he was this young guy with braids and braces and kind of sweet and scary at the same time, completely different character. And I mean, he ended up getting the part. He just walked away with it just for coming in for one thing, and then well, so I guess that isn't really a good example of what you're talking about, though.
No, but it's something. How about one more thing? This is good. Your brain's working.
I'm trying to think because I know we've even. Oh well, and then in the first thing I did in Colombia, we there was a part that was written for a guy. It was like these two guys in a bar who are gunfighters. It's all about underground gunfighting in South America. And this woman came in for another part, and I liked her so much that she wasn't, she wasn't right for the other part, that we ended up casting her. We flipped the sex of the second character.
Wow.
And made her the gunfighter. And that was all just, kind of her bringing something in that worked. I still think I'm not answering your question.
No.
Hey folks, Brian here. Mark and I often cringe when people call One-on-One Next Level a workshop studio because we are so much more than that. You and I both know that not all workshop studios are the same, and I can tell you with complete confidence that no other studio offers the same level of care or programming that we do, and we do so with pride. Here's just a few examples.
I'm Emily, and before One-on-One Next Level, I was in a super dark place in my career. I tried a lot of things to find representation, but nothing seemed to work, and I felt invisible. Then, almost as a Hail Mary, I signed up for a manager session. It was incredible, but it was also the thing to land me a manager. Since then, I booked a national commercial, I've gone on to create a thriving voiceover career, and signed with an agent, all through these classes and programs. One-on-One Next Level has been the single most important thing that's influenced my acting career and life in so many ways.
I'm Neil. In the last year, I booked 2 co-stars and 1 top-of-show guest star on major TV series. I also shot my first lead in a feature film. In fact, I've hit 20 big milestones thanks to the connections that I've made in classes at One-on-One Next Level. The key has been getting in front of casting directors. And that's why I love One-on-One Next Level. If you're not a member yet, what are you waiting for? Every actor deserves face time with the people in the business who can move your career forward. And One-on-One Next Level can help you do that.
Did you know One-on-One Next Level produces over 335 events and classes each month? Whether you join us in person or attend on Zoom, you can meet with A-list casting directors, filmmakers, TV showrunners, and executive producers, as well as agents and managers when you become a member. These days, it's harder and harder to get real face time with industry pros, but One-on-One Next Level makes it possible. To become a member, visit www.oneononenextlevel.com and click join. We can't wait to hear your success story.
Ken, you know what is incredible? Like, for instance, when we connected for this, you were telling me there was a project that you had that just whatever that I asked you about was with Sylvester Stallone was behind it. And then it didn't happen. And you were just like, all right, it didn't happen. I was going to ask you because I know you're, from the time going way back, the time this started, and this is really helpful to our audience. There's so many things that happen in life where, you get rejection, and now it happens today, and you're like used to it. But back then, you're like the ever-ready battery. You always have hung in there and continued to write and worked your way to the level of today. What would you say is like the thing that like made you how did you continue? Did you have any stories where you almost gave up because you couldn't handle rejection, or were you always good at handling rejection?
I mean, I guess by the time I really understood how much rejection there is in the business, I was already in the business and kind of committed to it. But yeah, I mean, there was a year and a half where I just, nothing sold, nothing worked. And, I mean, I think the thing that's different with a writer is you just go out and keep on trying to make your own work. You can write during those dead periods. You're not completely at the mercy of someone else hiring you. I mean, you have to go and sell the shit once you do it. But on the other hand, it's very much like being an actor in that most of the time it is just waking up and saying, okay, I'm going to beat my head against the wall again. I'm going to make something happen. And I think if it's your living, when I was a cop, it's, writing was easy because I don't think I ever really thought I was going to sell anything. It was always like buying a lottery ticket. It was like, well, it'd be fun to imagine this going somewhere, but I have a job, and probably this is, my path through life. So it was easy to write because it was a release. And then when it became a living, it was great in that it was a living. And then in some ways it's harder because it isn't it isn't the pure pleasure of art anymore. It becomes the calculus of, okay, what I really want to write isn't going to sell. So, I'll allow myself a couple of weeks to write it, but then I have to get back to, writing shit that will sell, or, trying to get on the show, and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think in some ways, you have to have those frustrations to really force yourself to reassert the part of you that is committed to making art and not just making a living. What I will say, and this is actually kind of pertinent to your audience, especially when I was doing numbers, we had a casting director who would bring in way too many people for every part. I mean, for the smallest part, he would bring in, 5, 8 people. He would give you every shape and size, and and a lot of times it was on me, because I wouldn't say, give me a person who fits exactly this box. I'd say, here's a really big box, give me some interesting ideas, and takes on, who could be that character. And so there were actors who he would bring in time and time again because he really liked them. He really believed in those actors. And, especially in TV, there's a weird politics that happens where, on numbers, it would be the writer would like someone, the director would like someone, I would like someone, and we'd end up 9 times out of 10 compromising on everybody's second choice. It wouldn't be anyone's favorite. It would be everyone's, yeah, I like them too. But as you're doing it, you're building a catalog in your head of people who are really interesting or really good. And even sometimes people who are completely wrong for the part you brought them in for, but you just know that they're good. There's something interesting about them. And you tell the casting director, keep throwing that person at me, because we're going to find something for them. And so I would say that, in the audition process, is that you're not just auditioning for the part, you're auditioning for the casting director and for the 5 people in the room who look completely disinterested, and hopefully 2 of them are worth the shit and are at least making a mental note of you and saying, yeah, I didn't think they were right for this, or I lost that argument this time, but, bring them in again. And, on numbers, I'd sit there as the showrunner and I would defer sometimes to the director or the writer of that episode. But then I wrote and directed a lot of episodes. And so I say, bring that person back for me. I want that person.
And nice. And why is it so often in these, callbacks or producer sessions do the writers, directors, showrunners look so disinterested or sometimes angry? Is it like some of them aren't invested in the audition process?
This isn't a callback room.
Yeah. Or is it that they're like a lot of stuff is going on and they're just angry from the day?
It depends. I'd say some of the, some people are awful in the casting room. Probably it's a godsend to go on tape for a lot of the people that you're auditioning for, because they're really shitty and graceless in the room.
Why? Why would you say that is? Because you would think, like you said, a long time ago, Ken Sanzel dreamed of being in that position. Now you're not that guy, but why would someone who one day dreamed of being in his position would be awful in the room? But you're right.
Okay, well, so for a TV director, that TV director is booking 5 jobs, 6 jobs a year. So in their head, they just want to get through every job faster. So that director may be pissed off that I'm giving adjustments to the actors that they know they don't like already. The writer, the younger writers tend to be really engaged. An older writer just might be an entitled asshole who has forgotten where he came from.
Yes.
Or may not be as invested, because they know they're not going to be directing down the line, or they know that I might override them, or they know that I may defer to the director. And so for them, it's just, it can become very grueling, to sit in 3 or 4 hours of casting. And, and then, candidly, you get a lot of bad auditions. And so, it gets rough when you sit there and listen to stuff being done badly.
By the way,
over
what do
and
you
over
call
again,
a bad
wrong.
audition? Explain yourself. When you see a bad audition in your head, what are some words that come out into play without thinking?
In LA, it was the CSI audition. It was people that came in and read it the way you'd seen it on CSI. In New York, it was the Law and Order audition. No matter what was on the script, they had done so many Law and Order auditions that they read it like a Law and Order. They read it at the Law and Order tempo. And and look, I would try to break them out of it because I wanted to see what they actually could do or what they had to offer. But if you're a director who's sitting through tons of auditions, you may just go. And then sometimes, honestly, sometimes it's favors. We had an actor on Numbers, I remember specifically, and actually it happened on. I'm not going to digress too much, but we had an actor's doctor who got brought in audition after audition. It was the favorite of the actor to get the audition. Eventually we had to give him a part, really just because it was cruel to the guy, that he kept on coming in, but he was terrible, but you get those favors and those people, sometimes those people just can't fucking act, or sometimes the casting director at the beginning, I find at the beginning of the process, the casting director, before they know your taste and appetites, can be very, they can bring you all different kinds of things that work for them in different scenarios. And it takes a while for them to dial in on your head and your rhythm and your sense of, okay, this is what people sound like saying dialogue in my world. And I think that's probably why people like to work with the same casting directors over and over again, is you develop a shorthand, with them about, okay, I know what Ken hears. I know that person's going to come in way too emotive and Ken likes something that's, more wry and detached, something like that. So yeah, I mean, it's so a bad audition can be a lot of things. Sometimes it's just super self-indulgent. Sometimes it's people who come in and just, like they figure the way to break out of the pack is to just go completely off of what the script is and do something wild and crazy. And again, that's okay if then you give them an adjustment and they come back to what you're doing. But, if they're, fuck you, no, this is it. Or sometimes you give an adjustment and an actor will argue with you about the adjustment, which arguing with me about the adjustment on the day or in rehearsal, that's a conversation. Arguing with me before you get a job, it's like, do you walk into Burger King and say, but no, you should be making fish, and no, I'm only going to show you how good I am at making fish. I mean,
yeah. It's a red flag.
I'm sorry. Right? Yeah. It's like, yeah. And you know what? I know it's Burger King. I know that what I'm making is Burger King, but we all got to go and say, how are we going to make the most palatable burger? We can't all bemoan the fact that we're not making fish, So I think that sometimes happens with bad auditions. But everyone's different. I love it. I also, before I directed my first movie, I took an acting for directors class down at the New School, and I realized not only how bad I was at acting, but how hard it was for me to release myself into characters. And as a result, I love actors. I love working with actors. I don't understand how they get where they're going, but I love getting there with them and playing with them. It's kind of like I always say show running is directing without the fun parts, because the fun parts are playing with cameras and playing with actors. And I love playing with cameras and playing with actors, even though I don't know how to be a DP and I don't know how to be an actor. So, playing with those people who bring skills that are magic to me, that's alchemy to me. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know, I mean, I love it, but I think that you can still walk into a room where it's hour 7 and people are exhausted, but also know that those people are dying. They're not there rooting against you giving a good audition. Especially hour 7, it's like you just want someone to come in and take the part. You want someone to come in and do something that you go, holy fucking Jesus, that is, that's not what I thought it was going to be.
Right.
And actually,
Yeah, continue.
the first movie I did, I remember we had like a team of 5 rogue cops, and the woman I had written, I can't remember specifically how I wrote it, but I wrote her kind of one way, and Dana Eskelson came in and read the part like she almost had like a stand-up comedian's chops, or like an improv way about her that wasn't the tough cop way that every other actress had come in playing it. And it was so exciting because I was beginning to think I had written a bad part. I'd written the part wrong, and I might have written the part wrong, but Dana came in and made it brilliant, and that's your dream every step of the way, is that people are going to come in and make you look good, make you look better than you are. So people are rooting for you, in casting, or the smart people are. And then, then they're assholes like everywhere else.
For you, does it start like when the actor first starts coming in the room, or do you kind of like start your judging hats when they start getting into reading the words, or do you notice for yourself, the way you were commenting before about like knowing about when someone has something, that when they come into the room, do you feel like hey, that guy could be the character?
No, I mean, for me, usually it's the adjustment.
Okay.
Sometimes they come in and off the bat, they do something that you go, fuck, that's awesome. Or, wow, there's something there.
Can you give me one thing that they do that you go like, wow, that's awesome?
It depends on the part. I mean, it's just how they read the part. Usually it's a manner, it's a little, for me, it's usually a little thing that's going, I like to say it's what's going on behind the eyes, like it's not how they're delivering the lines themselves. It's what I feel like they're processing, of these, 2 sheets of paper they've been handed an hour before they've walked in. There's usually something that's processing, but what really gets me excited about an actor is when you give them the adjustment, and whatever the conversation is between the two of you, and usually I've given by then, by the 7th or 8th person reading, for a part, I've kind of dialed in my adjustment to what I'm like, okay, here's the shape of this scene. You want to come in angry, and then this guy charms you, and you get kind of lulled into a false sense of security, and then at the end of it you realize, oh fuck, he's snookered me, and he stabs me in the chest. Usually someone ends up shot or stabbed in one of my movies, but so you have that shape, and then when you start talking to you're using the actors a lot of times to kind of work through your sense of the scene, especially when you're directing as well. But then when you give that adjustment and you see them really kind of taking what you're giving them and figuring out what they're going to do with it, that's when I get hopeful. Because a lot of times, I'd say probably 75% of the time, you give an adjustment and you get a feeling like they're just like, okay, he wants it faster, or, okay, he wants it quieter, or they're looking for that shortcut and then they're just going to do it. They're not really listening to you, or they're not really listening to you and putting it back into what's there, and I know it's tough, because, especially in TV, it's like you're getting, bereaved widow coming in and crying about how wonderful her husband was. And, it's a bullshit part. But if someone gives you something to latch onto in that bullshit part, the lifeline, how actors respond to being handed that lifeline of, here's how to make it something, or here's what I'm hoping you can make out of it. That's that's when you get excited, at least for me.
That's
It's
such a
when
good point.
you feel like the actor's gonna play, gonna do something with you.
It's about the adjustment and it's about how they take it in. And even if it's like,
Yeah.
a typical procedural, don't phone it in, like, make it special somehow.
Yeah. And sometimes, the question they ask back, if you just say, look, this character is way more anxious, like that was cool how you came in and played it laid back, but I want to see urgency. I want to see you figure out you're in trouble here. And then for them sometimes to come back and say, there's two different ways that you can respond to that. You can say, well, but on the page it says that he's laid back. It's like, they can argue with you, or they can say, should I come in laid back and get anxious? Should I come in anxious? Like how they process even the note, tells you a lot. And then, a lot of it is, there's a chemistry that happens between a director and an actor, just like there is between actors. There's some actors that you talk to and it's like, wow, it's just, we're talking in the same way, or we're talking in an exciting way, where something is going to come out of it, where something interesting will emerge. Maybe not even the right thing, but something interesting. And then there are the actors who, like I said, a lot of them, for good reasons and bad, come in kind of armored, and so hyper prepared. This is what I'm going to do. That I think, at least for me, I'm never really looking for the actor to come in and give me the screen ready performance. Because if they give me the screen ready performance, we're fucked, because it won't be as good on the day. You want them to come in and be an interesting, inhabit the character in some interesting way, but also, as a technician, as an artist, to be working in the same language as you are. And, and I'm one specific kind of guy. There are directors who really just, like they want to hear what you've got and they cast you based on what you're going to do. And, sometimes in TV, especially, if you're a day player, they want nothing more than for you to take care of your shit, show up, be coroner number 2, say your 2 lines and not cause anyone any problem. But I actually find and I, it might have been, I'm trying to remember who it was who I was casting with, and it was a director, and they were saying how it was the little parts that actually were the difference between a good movie and a bad movie. That you're casting the big parts at a certain level, or even, substantial parts at a certain level. And so every movie, like the actors, from this number of pages on up are going to be at a certain caliber. But it's the bartender who has 4 lines who you go, oh, fuck. And actually the bartender in that first movie was written I can't remember how she was written, but it was like, it was tougher. And then this one actress came in who was a Broadway actress, and not a big Broadway actress, but a working Broadway actress. And they love doing these little things because they pay a lot more money than most of the shit that they're doing. And it's, and this was a day, and it was 4 or 5 lines. And there was just something about her that she came in and felt like a day player out of a 40s film noir. And I fucking loved it. It kind of realigned my sense of that scene. And having those little, and her lines were not, there might've been one funny line, I don't even remember anymore, but it was basically, functional lines to get you to Stephen Baldwin talking to someone, talking to the bad guy or something. But just, her inhabiting those lines like that takes the scene and makes it go from that low budget flat scene to something that's, all the little detail of it has been managed. Those 2 lines are inhabited by a person and not just an actor, getting you information and getting you to the next thing. Which, by the way, is, that Law and Order read that I can't stand. It was very good for Law and Order, but yeah, I mean, like not my thing.
Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't done it yet, grab the Backstage Pass. You've got to get the Backstage Pass. There's behind the scenes footage. We've taken the biggest takeaways from the episode and written them down for you. There's also tools and resources to help move your career forward. It's the easiest way to turn this podcast into a tool for your career, as opposed to something you just listen to as you're doing the dishes.